couple of decades ago, we lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. Was that revolutionary?
No. Actually, it's not revolutionary because in the beginning there were virtually no voting ages. And people got to participate in politics based upon ability, talent, contribution to a group. For instance, in bands and tribes, there's no voting ages whatsoever, and you have these informal councils where men make decisions. And if you were a male, no matter how old, and you were, for instance, an excellent hunter, and you provided something back to your group, they would give you a voice inside of group decision making. So as I was arguing in the paper, is the codification of electoral ages actually took away from young people political agency, because now you have an age standard that you have to meet, and if you're not that old, it doesn't matter what your capabilities are, you're not old enough.
How young in the American context were you allowed to vote?
Youngest that I legally found was age 16.
Where was that?
Plymouth. Plymouth allowed 16-year-olds because of a poll tax, which was not a tax to vote, but basically a count of males. They taxed 16-year-olds, I believe 16, 23, 24. It isn't exactly written down that they were allowed to vote, but there's some pretty strong indications that they were participating in the irregular elections that Plymouth had.
So these are the Pilgrim founding fathers,
yes, that's right. And
who allowed 16-year-olds to vote.
In 1619, when the House of Burgesses first met, it allowed 17-year-olds to participate.
This is in Virginia?
Yes, in Virginia. And they took that age from a Roman age of citizenship.
So how do we get to 21 being the standard in America?
Well, that's borrowed from English law. That Englishmen had reckoned beginning in 12th, 13th century, that 21 would be the capstone age for adolescence. That by 21, that you should be capable enough to make decisions on your own, contractual relations, employment relations, and also electoral decisions. If you were male, you should be old enough to be doing that rationally, sensibly. 21 is sort of a mystery, why it's the age. Greeks broke up ages into blocks of 7. Romans had blocks of 5, sometimes blocks of 4. So there's some mysticism to why it may or may not be 21. My own particular hunch is 21 in a time period like in Greece and Rome, where the average life expectancy is early to mid-30s. 21 is getting on what we would consider to be middle-aged. So by 21, you probably would have already been married, established yourself as a householder, and probably been emancipated by your father, which by any classification would make you an adult. So there's no real, I cannot tell you that there's any, this is why it's 21. It sort of just becomes a custom.
And is this by the time of the American Revolution?
Oh, clearly by then, long before then. That there's British jurists who are counting 21 as the age to dispossess property, the age to inherit property, long before people even from Britain show up in America. And they borrow their age nations in some cases from Athens and Rome, that they take sort of Roman designations of age, modify them for English examples.
Okay. One of the things I found fascinating in your presentation was you found it hard to find any societies throughout history where elders were reserved the right to vote.
Very few, very, very few. As I mentioned in the talk, there's a couple cases in Africa where, and these societies have long since been disbanded, where they had different age castes, where when you got to the top of the age caste, then you got to make political decisions. In Sparta, there was a gerontocracy where you had to be 60 years old to serve in a council that made decisions for the city-state. But other than that, it is mainly the responsibility of adults who seem to have the physical, the emotional, and also the intellectual fitness in order to make decisions for a group.
All right, last question. David Hackett Fisher wrote a great book years ago called Growing Old. and he talks about how before the American Revolution we revered elders. After the American Revolution,
yes,
we revered youth. Did you find any pressure after the Revolution for bringing young people into the political system at an earlier age?
Yeah, there's some pressure to do it, but the pressure's minimal. That there seemed to be an idea of stakeholding tied to Republican ideology, that if the idea of a citizen is that anybody who has birthright status should be allowed to have a voice in how the new republic was going to be governed, the question then became, if I'm 18 years old and I fought in the Continental Army or my state militia, should I have the stake to have a vote in my new state electoral system? A little bit of discussion of that, but not very much.
Not very much.
And mainly it's because of the history of how people understood what adolescence was supposed to be, this time of anxiety, unruliness, irresponsibility, undisciplined, and you didn't want to have people like that making decisions. The interesting thing is, when the Constitution is written, there's no colonial example of age grading positions for representation. When you were of age in a colony, that meant you could both vote and serve in office. That was English tradition. It's really only at the Constitutional Convention where they age out. You have to be this age to vote, this age to be a representative, this age to be a senator, this age to be a president. And some of it is related to the fears of letting young people too soon, too quick, to make national decisions.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.